She just happens to think highly of me, which I really appreciate. But what's important is why we're all here today. We're going to talk about etiquette. But what is etiquette? Let's begin with that. Let's start with the first slide. We're talking about social etiquette for professional success. Why is it important that you know about social etiquette? So let's begin by asking you, what do you think social etiquette is? Any ideas? Does anybody have any idea why we should be interested in this topic? And what do you think it is? No comments? No one has any idea?
Proper norms for communicating in society.
Norms, okay. Anything else? Go ahead.
It gives respect and social order.
It gives you respect in a social order,
We have
okay.
to perform yourself and from somebody else.
That's right, the way we should do things. So in life, as in everything else, Lucy was talking before about professional qualifications. And the same way that you have to do things right in your area of expertise, in everyday living, there are norms that we should comply with. And that's what etiquette is about. So before we begin, I'd like to talk a little bit about the origins of etiquette. What is etiquette? And what does the previous one, please, it's all right. What does King Louis XIV, the Sun King of France, have to do with anything? Well, for us that speak Spanish, besides English, we know that the word etiquette, etiqueta, also have to do with labels. To this day, the word etiqueta in Spanish means both norms of social behavior and labels. And the origin is because in French, the word etiquette also has those two meanings. And King Louis XIV, he reigned for 72 years. And he loved pomp and circumstance. And he had this wonderful palace built in the outskirts of France. If you're ever in Paris, please visit the Versailles Palace. So this beautiful palace, you can do the next one. See, this is the Palace of Versailles with this wonderful gardens. So King Louis XIV wanted his palace to be kept in perfect shape and for people to behave accordingly. So he had his servants, and especially his gardeners, fill these beautiful gardens with etiquettes, labels, signs that showed people how they should behave. So don't step on the grass, don't pick the flowers, don't throw garbage in my beautiful fountains. And all of that was in etiquettes, in labels, in signs. And that is the origin of the word etiquette to mean what we now understand it to mean, which is the way to behave correctly. All right? So once King Louis put these signs up, he forced everyone to behave in a certain way. He had a routine for everything, from the moment he got up in the morning until he went to bed at night. Nothing was left to chance. So the way to behave has evolved into the correct way of behaving among social orders, among people. In that sense, it used to be about different classes. So the nobles would fight for the privilege of serving the king. It was an honor to be chosen by the king, to sit with him at the table, to help him. He had a routine. He would have his maids wake him up every day at 8 a.m. with his clothes all set. The first thing he did was go to his chapel. He would pray early in the morning every day. And it was an honor to be invited to go with him to the chapel, then to go out in the gardens. But all of this had to be done following very strict rules that he imposed on everyone around him. So that's the origin of etiquette. Just so that we know when we talk about etiquette, what are we talking about? We're talking about norms of behavior. Cultures have different norms of behavior. So etiquette, like language, is alive. It evolves. It's not static. So obviously the rules that King Louis XIV had are not the same rules that we have. But some of it is the same. And the pattern of behavior is the same. What is the pattern? The pattern is that people that have good manners, that have ample use of etiquette and norms, are kind. They are courteous. They are not offensive. That's why we call this civility, because we are in a civilized society. The more people that have good manners, and the more people that behave accordingly. So far, so good? Any questions? Please feel free to interrupt me if you have any doubts, if you want to comment on anything. Go ahead.
Would it not be improper etiquette if we interrupted you?
It is very improper if I'm in the middle of a conversation with someone else and you interrupt me. It is not at all improper to interrupt a presentation like this, because I don't want this to be a monologue. I want this to be a participating event. Because, as Lucy mentioned, I am an adult educator, and we know that adults learn from their own experience. So any experience you want to share with us will help us retain all the information that we are discussing today. So it's not just me standing here talking like a parrot, but sharing in this knowledge, okay? So thank you, but feel free to interrupt me. I will not be offended in the least, okay? All right, so now we know where this comes from. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see why this is important to all of us. I love listening to Lucy in her introduction, explaining what career tech is about. We need to go out there into the professional or business world. We need to be equipped academically, but we also need to be equipped with the social graces. Why? Because it's a very competitive world. And there might be a lot of people that have the same academic credentials that we have. But why are we different? Why are we better? Why should someone hire us instead of someone else? Because I have that additional knowledge. I have that competitive edge because I handle the social graces. Because I have those soft skills that I haven't been tested on, that are not part of my degree, but that make me a better employee. Why? Because it makes me a better human being. So if I'm a better human being, no matter what I'm doing it better than someone that doesn't handle this. And it goes from something as simple as this. Walk into an elevator and say good morning. How many people respond?
That's true.
It's amazing. But what happens if in that elevator is the CEO of the company and you walk in and you say good morning? You think that CEO is not looking around? You think he's not aware of who you are? You think if he needs somebody to be promoted or to be considered for other tasks, he's not going to remember that person? What happens with that first impression? First impressions are crucial. And it has to do, first, with our physical appearance. All studies show that we have made a first impression on someone within the first 30 seconds that we see someone. 30 seconds. That's the way our brain works. It's fair, not fair, whatever. It's reality. It's our physiology. We take a mental picture of someone within the first 30 seconds before you open your mouth. And 50% of that first impression is based on how we look. Simply on how we look. And that means we have to look like we want to be perceived. You cannot leave that to chance. You cannot look like what you are today, or where you are today, or what job you have today. You have to look like how you want to be perceived 5 years from now, 10 years from now. If you want to be perceived like a professional, you have to look like a professional. Don't think that you can go to work in jeans and flip-flops